For centuries, the Karth Dominion ruled the stars with iron claws and burning pride. They were a race born for war. Giant, four-armed warriors standing twice the height of a man, their skin like dark stone and their eyes burning like molten gold. Entire galaxies knew their name, and when Karth fleets arrived, whole civilizations surrendered before the first shot was fired. The Karth had never been defeated. They believed they never would be. Their flagships were city-sized fortresses, dark triangles of metal that could blot out the light of a star. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a planet's surface in hours. To the Karth, fear was a weapon they had mastered. They used it to control, to conquer, to rule. Nothing in the universe made them tremble. On this day, that confidence filled the air aboard their greatest warship, the Oblivion's Edge, as it drifted at the edge of a new system, one called Sol. Inside the massive command bridge, General Zarthel stood before a wall of holographic stars. He was the image of Karth perfection, tall, armored, and cold. His voice carried the weight of countless victories. "Report," he ordered. "Scanners show several inhabited worlds." "General," replied his second-in-command, a smaller but still fearsome warrior named Kral. "Primary species, human. Technologically inferior. No known planetary defense grid capable of challenging our fleet." Zarthel gave a sharp, humorless smile. "Inferior. I like that word." Around him, dozens of Karth officers worked silently. Their claws tapped glowing screens, their tails flicked with anticipation. This mission was supposed to be routine, a swift strike, a quick subjugation, and another flag added to the Dominion's empire. But then, something unexpected happened. A soft tone echoed across the bridge. "Incoming transmission," an officer said. "From the human system." The general raised a brow. "They dare to speak?" The holographic projection flickered to life. The image that appeared was unimpressive. A human, smaller, frail-looking, with soft features and pale skin. His voice was calm, almost emotionless, yet somehow powerful. "This is Admiral Cole of the Terran Defense Fleet," the human said. "You have entered restricted space. Turn back immediately." The Karth bridge erupted in laughter. Zarthel himself let out a deep, rumbling growl of amusement. "You threaten us?" he said through a grin of sharp teeth. But the human didn't flinch. His eyes were steady, his tone firm. "You've crossed the line," Cole said. "Turn back or we'll show you what fear really means." The laughter stopped. It wasn't the words themselves. It was how he said them. Not as a plea, but as a promise. There was no sign of panic, no trembling, no arrogance. Just quiet certainty. For a brief, uncomfortable moment, the mighty warriors of the Karth Dominion felt something strange. A flicker of unease. Then Zarthel's smile returned, sharp as a blade. "Fear? They speak of fear to us." He spread his arms, addressing the entire bridge. "Let them learn what the word truly means." The crew roared in agreement. The command was given, and the engines of the Oblivion's Edge ignited with a thunder that shook the stars. Around it, hundreds of Karth ships formed into a perfect spear-shaped formation, ready to strike at the human system's outer colonies. But even as the fleet advanced, Zarthel found his thoughts returning to that human's voice. Calm, defiant. He brushed the thought away. "Primitive," he muttered. "They'll break like all the others." Moments later, they reached the orbit of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The humans had built a colony there, small, fragile, a scattering of lights across the ice. Zarthel expected immediate surrender. Instead, the human ships moved toward them, tiny compared to the Karth fleet, fragile compared to their armor. Yet they came on without hesitation. "Targets approaching," Kral reported. "Small craft. Poorly armed." "Destroy them," Zarthel ordered. Beams of plasma tore across the void, cutting through human ships like fire through paper. Dozens vanished in seconds. But even as they died, they did something the Karth didn't expect. They kept coming. One human frigate, its hull burning and broken, rammed straight into a Karth cruiser. The impact shattered both ships. Another followed. Then another. They weren't retreating. They were sacrificing themselves. The bridge grew silent as a human transmission came through the comms. A final message from one of the doomed ships. "You think we fear death? We invented it." Then the transmission cut out, and the Karth carrier, dominance of stone, exploded from the inside. For a moment, time froze. No one on the Oblivion's edge spoke. The shockwave rippled across the fleet. One of their own ships, gone, destroyed by creatures that should have been running in terror. Zarthel's claws clenched the railing. His golden eyes flickered with something unfamiliar. Krau looked at him nervously. "General, what are your orders?" Zarthel stared out into the darkness, watching the small, flickering lights of human ships still fighting, still charging towards certain death. "Continue the attack," he said finally, his voice low. "Erase them all." But inside, for the first time in his long and bloody career, General Zarthel felt something cold move through his chest. He didn't know it yet, but it was fear. The wreckage of the Karth cruiser still burned above Europa, its remains drifting through the blackness like glowing ashes. For the first time in memory, a Karth ship had fallen to an enemy's hands, and worse, to a primitive species the Dominion had barely considered worth noticing. General Zarthel stood silent on the bridge of the Oblivion's edge, watching the screens flicker with battle reports. Every explosion echoed through the minds of his crew. The humans were still fighting, smaller ships darting between the massive Karth war vessels like wasps around a sleeping beast. "Status?" Zarthel demanded. Kral's voice trembled slightly, something rare for a Karth officer. "Human ships continue their attacks. They are targeting fuel lines and weak points in the hulls. They fly too close for our main cannons to track." "Then crush them," Zarthel growled. He expected obedience. He received hesitation. "General," said the communications officer quietly, "they do not flee even when their ships are breaking apart. They ram, detonate, sacrifice themselves." Zarthel turned, his golden eyes narrowing. "Then they are fools." But deep inside, something gnawed at him. The Karth fought for glory, for conquest, for the pride of the Dominion. These humans, they fought for something else, something invisible, something dangerous. Outside, the icy moon of Europa burned. The human colony below had activated every defense it had. Rail guns carved from mining equipment, drones made from old transport shuttles, even surface-based plasma cannons meant for industrial melting. None of it should have mattered. Yet somehow it did. Each human shot seemed to find its mark, guided by desperation and fierce determination. Every time a Karth ship fell, the humans cheered. Every time a human ship was destroyed, another appeared from the dark. The humans had learned to use the system itself as a weapon. They hid behind Jupiter's radiation fields, emerged from its magnetic storms, and fired from positions no sane commander would ever use. They fought like creatures with nothing left to lose, and it was working. "Enemy frigate closing fast," shouted an officer. "Destroy it! We can't lock on! It's moving erratically!" The bridge filled with alarms. A small human ship, its engines flaring bright white, was heading straight toward them. The Karth guns fired, tearing off its wings, but it kept coming, spinning and burning. At the last second, it transmitted a single message across all Karth frequencies. "For those who couldn't run." Then the frigate slammed into the side of a Karth destroyer, and both vanished in a white blast that split the void. The explosion lit up the bridge of the Oblivion's edge. Zarthel's jaw tightened. Around him, his warriors stared in silence. This wasn't war. This was madness. Yet somehow, it was working. He turned toward the holographic display. Dozens of Karth ships had already fallen. Human losses were far greater, yes. But the Karth were supposed to be untouchable. They weren't. "Pull back the second line," Zarthel ordered. "Reform into siege formation." Krall blinked. "A retreat, General." Zarthel snarled. "A repositioning!" But everyone on the bridge knew what it meant. Outside, the humans kept fighting long after their lines should have collapsed. Some ships, damaged beyond repair, turned themselves into missiles. Ground batteries kept firing even as orbital debris rained down on them. In every direction, the message was the same. They would not yield. Hours later, the surface of Europa was cracked and ruined. Its cities were gone. Yet the Karth had not won. They had burned a moon, yes, but they had also lost a fleet. And across the Dominion, word spread faster than any command could stop it. The humans had destroyed a Karth warship. For a people who had never known defeat, the shock was deep. Soldiers whispered in their barracks. Captains questioned their orders. Something small but deadly had entered the heart of the Karth Dominion. Doubt. In his private chamber aboard the Oblivion's Edge, General Zarthel replayed the human transmission. The voice of that first admiral echoed in the dark. "Turn back or we'll show you what fear really means." He replayed it again and again. Fear. He had laughed at that word once. Now it no longer sounded like a joke. He studied the tactical logs, the human formations, their reckless maneuvers, their suicidal bravery. Each move should have been a failure, yet together they formed a pattern, a kind of chaotic logic. It wasn't random, it was human. It was human. He found himself whispering, "How do you fight those who do not fear death?" No answer came. Outside his window, the frozen light of Jupiter gleamed across the wreckage field. The ghosts of the dead drifted between the stars, Karth and human alike. Kral entered quietly. "The survivors on Europa have been captured. Shall we broadcast their executions to the colonies as usual?" Zarthel didn't answer right away. For a moment he almost said no. Almost. But the pride of the Dominion was stronger than his unease. "Do it," he said finally. "Let the humans see what happens to those who defy us." Kral nodded and left. Zarthel stood there, watching the darkness outside. He could still hear the human voices through the static, laughing, shouting, defying. The Karth had fought countless wars, but never against a species like this. He didn't know it yet. But the Battle of Europa would mark the beginning of something far greater, a storm that would spread through the stars, changing every empire and every world it touched, and at its heart would be a single truth that no Karth would ever forget. The humans did not fear them. The smoke of battle still drifted above Jupiter's storms when the Karth Dominion realized something terrible. They had underestimated the humans. What began as a simple invasion had become a spreading flame that refused to die. Every Karth fleet sent to subdue the humans returned wounded, smaller, or didn't return at all. What confused the Dominion most was how humanity fought. They weren't just reckless. They were creative. In the shadow of ruined colonies, the humans built new weapons out of scrap. They used asteroid fragments as stealth mines. They hacked Karth transmissions to broadcast music, strange rhythmic sounds that unnerved even the hardest soldiers. And in every battle, when defeat seemed certain, they found a new trick. Soon the humans stopped defending. They started attacking. On the edge of the Helios belt, a small Karth supply convoy drifted quietly through the dust. The Karth commander aboard the Iron Maw expected an easy run, until the sensors flickered. "Interference?" he growled. "No, Commander," said the technician. "Something's moving fast!" Before the commander could respond, the asteroid field around them came alive. Rocks split open, revealing hidden engines. They weren't asteroids at all. They were human ships, disguised and waiting. "Open fire!" the Karth shouted. But the humans were already inside their formation. Tiny corvettes darted between the massive ships, firing magnetic charges that attached to Karth hulls. Moments later, explosions tore through the convoy. From the wreckage, a single human broadcast echoed across all frequencies. "The belt remembers." So do we. It was over in minutes. The humans didn't capture. They didn't stay. They vanished into the dark, leaving nothing but silence and debris. In the Dominion's capital on the planet Varan, the news hit like a hammer. The Karth Council met in the Great Chamber, their voices filled with anger and disbelief. "These creatures were supposed to be weak," one roared. "They fight like predators," hissed another. "They fight like us," muttered a third. At the center of it all stood General Zarthel, summoned to explain the growing disaster. His once impressive armor was dented, scorched, a silent mark of his failure. "You were ordered to crush them," said the High Chancellor, her voice cold. "Instead, the Dominion is bleeding." Zarthel's claws flexed. "You speak of bleeding as if I do not feel it myself. The humans are different. They adapt faster than any enemy we have faced. Every time we strike, they learn." The Council laughed bitterly. "Then kill them before they learn again." "It is not that simple," Zarthel said quietly. They fight with no honor, no logic. They turn their own deaths into weapons. They do not break. They only grow angrier. The Chancellor's golden eyes glowed. Then make them fear again. Remind the galaxy who we are. Zarthel bowed slightly but said nothing. He had begun to wonder if that was even possible. Far from the Karth's grand halls, on a secret human outpost orbiting Saturn, Admiral Cole stood before a wall of holographic stars. His fleet was battered, his resources thin, but his spirit, like that of his people, burned bright. Across from him stood Captain Mira Ellen, a young commander with scars across her face and a spark in her eyes. They're spreading faster than we can stop them, Mira said. The Karth are regrouping near Mars. Cole nodded slowly. Good, let them come. Mira frowned. You want them to attack? I want them to think they can win, he said. Fear works both ways. They taught us that. Now we'll teach it back, she smiled grimly. Then we'll give them a show. The next Karth offensive came 2 weeks later. Dozens of warships descended upon the Martian orbit, but this time, the humans were ready. When the Karth fleet arrived, the skies above Mars were empty. No defenses, no ships, no resistance. Cowards, sneered Kral. They've abandoned the planet. But as soon as the Karth ships entered orbit, the trap was sprung. The thin Martian atmosphere lit up with hundreds of detonations. Massive energy bursts erupted from beneath the surface, old terraforming reactors reprogrammed into bombs. The shockwaves tore through the fleet, sending ships crashing into each other. The red planet glowed with fire. Retreat! Shouted Kral. It's a trap! Too late! The humans had lured them in and made Mars itself a weapon. The few Karth ships that escaped sent desperate transmissions across the galaxy, reports of chaos, of flames that reached the stars, of a species that refused to die. General Zarthel stood alone in his war room, watching the battle data replay in silence, every explosion reflected in his eyes. His claws dug into the metal table. The humans weren't just soldiers. They were something new, something that couldn't be measured by strength or technology. He whispered to himself, They fight like the void itself, endless, cold, and patient. Outside his window, the Dominion fleet burned in Martian orbit. And deep within his chest, that cold feeling, the one he had tried to ignore since Europa, returned. Fear. Real fear. But behind it, another feeling began to grow. Respect. For the first time in his long life, General Zarthel wasn't sure if he wanted to destroy the humans or understand them. The red world burned. From orbit, Mars looked like a dying ember, its thin atmosphere swirling with fire and smoke. The terraforming reactors, long dormant, had been turned into massive explosives by human engineers desperate to buy time. They had transformed the planet itself into a weapon. To the Karth, it was madness. To the humans, it was strategy. General Zarthel's fleet emerged from the void in full formation, black ships cutting through the red haze like knives through blood. Thousands of cannons hummed with power, ready to erase the last human stronghold. Mars, Zarthel growled. This is where it ends. On the command deck of the Oblivion's Edge, his crew watched the burning world below. The humans had dared to turn an entire planet into a trap, something no Karth commander could have imagined. Scans show heavy energy spikes across the surface, reported Kral, his second in command. Massive reactors detonating one by one. Then the humans are destroying their own world, Zarthel said coldly. Let them. We will finish what they began. He raised one of his 4 arms, signaling the attack. Open fire! High above the planet, human ships rose from the storm like ghosts. They were smaller, weaker, and badly damaged, but they moved with terrifying precision. Every engine burn, every shot, every suicide run had purpose. The human flagship, TDS Valiant, led the defense. Inside, Admiral Cole stood at the viewing glass, watching Mars glow beneath him. They're coming, whispered Captain Mira Ellen beside him. Her face was streaked with dust and blood, but her eyes burned bright. Hundreds of them, Cole nodded slowly. Then let's make it hurt. He turned to his crew. Activate the magnetosphere array. Across the surface, ancient terraforming towers roared to life. They had once been used to create an atmosphere. Now they were repurposed into something far deadlier. The towers released massive electromagnetic bursts that ripped through Karth targeting systems, turning their precise formations into chaos. Karth ships veered off course. Their weapons flickered and failed. The Oblivion's edge itself shuddered under the interference. "What is this?" Zarthel roared. Kral's voice was tense. "Electromagnetic disruption. It's affecting our systems." "Impossible!" Zarthel slammed his claws against the console. How could primitives... But before he could finish, alarms blared. "General! Enemy vessels approaching from the far side of the planet!" The humans had used Mars as cover, launching a counterattack from the night side. The Valiant led a swarm of smaller ships, dozens of them diving directly into Karth formations. Each human vessel carried old reactors rigged as warheads. "They weren't just ships, they were sacrifices. Brace for impact," shouted Kral. The stars erupted in light as ship after ship detonated, tearing holes through the Dominion fleet. Shards of burning metal rained down into the Martian sky. On the Valiant, Admiral Cole gripped the console as shock waves shook his ship. "Status? Half our fleet is gone," Mira reported. "But so is theirs." Cole exhaled slowly. "Then we keep fighting." Through the forward glass, he saw the massive silhouette of the Oblivion's edge turning toward them. It was colossal, a fortress among ships. "There he is," Cole said. "The Karth general," Mira glanced at him. "We don't have the power to face that thing." Cole smiled faintly. "We don't need power. We just need courage." He opened a transmission to all surviving human ships. "This is Admiral Cole. The enemy thinks Mars will be our grave. Let's make it theirs. Every reactor, every weapon, every ounce of will, give it everything you have. For Earth. For humanity." Static answered him, followed by a chorus of voices. "For humanity!" The two flagships clashed in orbit, one born of human defiance, the other of Karth pride. The Valiant fired until its guns melted. The Oblivion's edge returned fire with blinding fury. Whole decks shattered, and fragments of ships spun into the void. Inside his burning bridge, Zarthel watched human vessels dive again and again into impossible attacks. Every time he thought they would retreat, they came closer. "They should be running," Kral said, awe in his voice. "Why aren't they running?" Zarthel stared at the human flagship as it turned toward them, engines flaring, shields gone, hull splitting apart. "Because they don't know how." The Valiant struck the Oblivion's edge broadside, ramming into its armor. Explosions tore through both ships. Alarms screamed. Kral was thrown to the ground. Zarthel barely managed to stay standing. On the human bridge, Admiral Cole smiled through the smoke. "They'll remember Mars," he whispered. "They'll remember who made them afraid." He pressed the final command. The Valiant's reactors went critical, and the ship exploded with the force of a small star. When the light faded, Mars was silent. Half the Karth fleet was gone. The rest drifted, crippled and stunned. The Oblivion's edge survived, but barely. Its armor melted, its engines dead. Zarthel stood among the ruins, staring at the burning planet below. "General," Kral said weakly, "the humans, they're all dead." Zarthel's eyes glowed faintly. "No, they've only begun." He looked out at Mars, a planet on fire, yet somehow still defiant. The humans had destroyed their world to protect it. No Karth could understand that kind of madness. No Karth could match it, and in that moment, General Zarthel, the undefeated warlord of the Dominion, finally knew what it meant to face an enemy that could not be conquered. The Karth Dominion had never known silence. For ages, its worlds had echoed with the thunder of marching armies, the hum of starship engines, the cries of conquered species. But now the noise was gone. Silence had become the sound of fear. After Mars, nothing was the same. The mighty Dominion fleets limped home, half-destroyed and leaderless. Entire sectors went dark, their commanders refusing to answer the High Council's summons. Whispers spread faster than orders. The humans did it. One small species, born on a blue world no one had cared about, had made the great Dominion tremble. In the shadowed halls of the Karth capital, Varen Prime, the High Council gathered. The chamber that had once been filled with arrogance was now heavy with unease. "Human resistance continues," said one counselor. "They've taken our shipyards in the Helios belt." "Impossible!" shouted another. "They don't have the numbers." "Numbers don't matter," the first one said quietly. "They fight like ghosts." At the far end of the hall stood General Zarthel, silent. The once unshakable warlord now carried the look of a man haunted by what he'd seen. His armor was scarred and dull, his voice lower than before. "The humans destroyed half our fleet," said the Chancellor, glaring down at him. "And you call that a ghost story?" Zarthel met her gaze calmly. "I call it what it is, fear." The word hit the room like a strike. Every Karth shifted uncomfortably. Fear was not supposed to exist in their language, yet they all felt it. "You think the Dominion fears these creatures?" The Chancellor spat. "I don't think," Zarthel replied softly. "I know." He turned toward the great window overlooking the city. Below, the once glorious skyline flickered with riots. Citizens shouted, soldiers mutinied, and holograms of human victories played on stolen broadcast loops. "Even our people whisper their name now," Zarthel said. "Not as enemies, as warnings." Far across the stars, in the broken remains of the Mars Defense Fleet, humanity rebuilt in the dark. Commander Mira Ellen had survived the blast, barely. Her ship, Echo 9, floated within the shattered orbit of Mars, gathering survivors from wrecked vessels. The void around her was filled with twisted metal and frozen bodies. Yet in that graveyard, hope lived. Every signal they intercepted told the same story. The Karth were retreating. They weren't invincible anymore. The humans had done more than win battles. They had broken the illusion of Karth perfection. Inside the dim bridge, Mira spoke to the tired faces of her crew. "We don't have much left," she said, "but what we do have is enough." "Enough for what?" asked one young pilot, his voice trembling. "To remind them that we're still here," Mira said, "and to remind the galaxy that fear can be turned back on those who use it." They cheered, softly, weakly. But it was enough. Weeks later, General Zarthel sat alone aboard the crippled Oblivion's edge. He had refused to return to the capital, choosing exile in orbit over shame in the council halls. Through the viewport, he watched the stars drift, cold, endless, indifferent. Once he had believed those stars belonged to him. Now he wasn't so sure. He replayed the recordings from Mars again and again. The faces of humans, bloody, exhausted, smiling through the smoke. The final broadcast of Admiral Cole before his death. "They think we fight because we're strong. They're wrong. We fight because we're human. Because even when the light dies, we still burn." The words echoed through the empty bridge. For the first time in his long life, Zarthel understood something about strength. The Dominion's power had always come from dominance, from crushing others. The human's power came from something deeper, something the Karth couldn't copy. He whispered to himself, "They win by losing. They rise from ashes." The idea terrified him. Then, one day, a message reached him, an encrypted signal from the frontier. It was short and strange. Human fleet sighted near the rim. Not attacking, not retreating, watching, watching. That word sent a chill through Zarthel's spine. Humans had been quiet since Mars, rebuilding in silence, but their presence lingered like a shadow. Every Karth patrol now traveled in fear of an ambush that might never come. Rumors spread among the soldiers, of invisible ships that appeared and vanished, of ghost voices whispering through comms, of laughter heard before ships exploded. No one could prove it was true, but every Karth believed it. In the ruined docks of Varan Prime, as the Dominion tried to rebuild, walls began to crack. Commanders deserted, colonies rebelled. Even the once loyal vassal species rose up, inspired by humanity's defiance. A small child on one conquered world drew the image of a human on a wall, a simple figure with fire behind its eyes. Beneath it, he wrote in trembling script, "We can fight too." The legend of the humans spread faster than any fleet. They became something more than soldiers. They became a story, A promise whispered across the stars. They fought the gods and made them bleed, and in the quiet of his dark ship, General Zarthel listened to those whispers. He closed his eyes and wondered if this was what the end of an empire sounded like. He did not know whether to hate the humans or to thank them. Because through their defiance, they had shown him the truth he had never wanted to see. The Dominion had never been unbreakable. It had only never been tested by them. The stars above Earth glowed red with the light of war. The Karth Dominion had gathered what remained of its fleets, hundreds of warships, still mighty despite their losses. They had one goal left, to end humanity before their legend destroyed the Dominion completely. From his command deck aboard the Oblivion's Edge, General Zarthel stared at the blue planet below. Earth, the birthplace of the species that had broken his empire. He had come to end this once and for all. His fleet stretched across orbit like a black storm. "This is their home," Zarthel said quietly. "When it burns, so will their spirit." Kral, standing beside him, hesitated before speaking. "And if it doesn't burn, General?" Zarthel's golden eyes narrowed. "Then nothing in the universe ever will." On the ground, Earth prepared for its final night. Cities were dark. Skies filled with defense drones and scavenged fighters. Every remaining human fleet had returned to the homeworld, damaged, patched, and full of soldiers who refused to give up. In a hidden bunker beneath the ruins of New York, Captain Mira Ellen stood before her command screen. Behind her, soldiers and engineers worked without rest. The walls shook from distant impacts. "Status?" she asked. "Global defenses are holding," said a technician. "Barely. Then they'll hold longer," Mira said. "We're not giving them our world." She turned toward the transmission console and opened a direct link to every surviving human ship. "This is Captain Mira Ellen. This is Earth. The Karth are here. They think this is the end of us. They think fear will win again. But they've forgotten who we are. We are the ones who stood on Europa. We are the ones who burned Mars. We are humanity, and we don't surrender." The message echoed across the planet, through bunkers, ships, and orbiting stations. Even in the silence of space, the words carried weight. Even in the silence of space, the words carried weight. The first Karth assault began at dawn. Massive energy beams rained down from orbit, striking continents like lightning. Oceans boiled. Mountain ranges cracked. Entire defense satellites vanished in fire. The Dominion's power returned in full, terrible and unstoppable. And yet, Earth fought back. Hidden missile silos opened across the globe. Thousands of old nuclear weapons, relics from humanity's ancient wars, launched into the sky. Some missed, some were intercepted, but enough hit. The explosions tore holes in the Karth formation. Even the mighty Oblivion's Edge shook. "Status report!" Zarthel barked. "Significant damage across the lower fleet line," Kral replied. "Their attacks are primitive but relentless." Zarthel's claws scraped against the metal console. "They are dying," he said. "And they still fight." He looked at the burning Earth below. "Then so be it. If this world will not surrender, I will erase it." He gave the order. In orbit, the sky turned white. The Karth prepared to fire their planet buster, a weapon capable of tearing Earth's crust apart. But before they could, a burst of static filled their comms. A human voice cut through every channel. "You wanted to know what fear feels like?" Zarthel froze. He recognized that voice. It was Admiral Cole, but Cole was dead. He had died at Mars, or so they thought. The signal came from a human ship emerging from behind the moon, a massive, blackened warship built from scavenged Karth wrecks. It bore a single name across its hull, TDS Phoenix. Admiral Cole appeared on the transmission feed, scarred, older, but alive. "General Zarthel," he said calmly, "Mars wasn't the end. It was the beginning. You took everything from us, and you made us stronger. Now, we finish this." Before the Karth could react, the Phoenix released its payload, hundreds of smaller ships hidden within its hull, each one carrying stolen Dominion tech powered by human reactors. They swarmed the Oblivion's Edge like a cloud of fireflies. "Destroy them!" shouted Kral, but it was chaos. The human ships moved too fast, striking weak points the Dominion didn't even know they had. Explosions rippled across the flagship. Zarthel stood tall amid the chaos, flames licking the edges of his armor. "Bring me their leader," he ordered. Alive. Moments later, his screen lit again, Admiral Cole's face calm even as battle raged behind him. "You came here to destroy us," Cole said. "But you can't destroy what doesn't break," Zarthel snarled. "You think this is victory?" "You are dying!" Cole smiled faintly. "So are you." Then the Phoenix dove straight into the Oblivion's edge. The impact was cataclysmic. The explosion consumed both ships, creating a blinding wave that reached the edge of the atmosphere. Fragments rained down like shooting stars. From Earth's surface, people looked up and saw the sky burn, not in defeat but in triumph. Hours later, the wreckage of both flagships drifted silently in orbit. Amid the floating debris, a single escape pod flickered with life. Inside, General Zarthel stirred. His armor was shattered, his body broken, but his mind was alive. He looked out at the blue world below, still shining beneath the smoke and ruin. "They did it," he whispered. They actually did it. The humans had survived. Against all logic, against all power, they had won. And for the first time in his long, violent life, Zarthel felt peace. He had fought an enemy worthy of fear and of respect. He closed his eyes as the last of his ship's power faded. "In the end," he murmured, "they made gods tremble." The pod drifted silently toward Earth's atmosphere, burning like a falling star. When the fires of war finally died, the stars went silent. The ruins of ships, both human and Karth, drifted through the black, glowing faintly in the light of distant suns. Broken engines whispered their last breaths. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy knew quiet. The Dominion was gone. On Earth, the oceans still boiled in places, cities were reduced to ash, and the skies were filled with debris. Yet life remained. In a shattered field near what was once London, small fires burned between the wreckage of machines. Among them, survivors gathered, men and women, soldiers and civilians alike, wrapped in torn uniforms, their faces lit by the first sunrise after victory. Captain Mira Ellen stood among them. Her arm was in a sling, her hair gray with ash, but her eyes were steady. She stared at the horizon, where the wreck of a Karth ship lay half buried in the sea. "They really came for us," she whispered. "All of them. And still, we're here." A young boy beside her looked up. "Do you think they'll come back?" Mira smiled faintly. "If they do, they'll remember what happened here, far above the planet, among the drifting remains of the Oblivion's edge." A small rescue craft moved carefully through the debris. Inside, human salvage crews searched for survivors and data. They didn't expect to find anything alive. Then one of them gasped, "Sir, you'll want to see this." Inside a cracked escape pod lay General Zarthel, barely breathing. His once golden armor dulled, his forearms limp at his sides. The crew raised their weapons, but he didn't move. He was looking through the window, down at Earth. His voice was weak but calm. "You survived." One of the humans, a medic, hesitated. "Yeah, looks like we did." Zarthel let out a rough, rumbling sound, not a laugh, not a cry. "Something in between. Good," he said simply. "The universe needs you." Then his eyes closed, and the light in them went out. Weeks passed. The war was over, but its scars would last for generations. Humanity rebuilt, slowly, painfully. The cities that still stood became centers of cooperation and rebirth. Nations that once fought each other now worked side by side. The humans had not only survived the Karth, they had united because of them, and the legend spread. Across the galaxy, to worlds once enslaved by the Dominion, stories of the humans traveled like wildfire. On the icy planet of Thelos, where the Karth had once ruled with fear, a child asked her mother, "Are the humans real?" Her mother smiled and nodded. "They are. They fought the Karth and made them fall." The child's eyes widened. "But how?" "The Karth were gods." The mother looked up at the stars. "The humans didn't fight like gods. They fought like people, people who refused to die. On a distant mining world, a group of alien workers found a cracked Karth propaganda screen still playing old war footage. They gathered around, silent, watching grainy images of human ships charging into battle. One of them whispered, "That's what courage looks like." They began to paint the human flag, the blue and white of Earth, across the walls of their colony, and so began the age of defiance, a time when every enslaved species looked at the stars and remembered the humans who had dared to fight back. Years later, deep in orbit around Jupiter, a memorial was built. It floated silently above Europa, the place where it had all begun. Carved into the side of the black monument were words written in a dozen languages. Human and alien alike, they were told to fear the darkness. Instead, they became its light. Visitors came from every corner of the galaxy, some to pay respect, others to understand how such a small species had brought an empire to its knees. One alien scholar stood before the monument and turned to a human guard beside him. "How did you do it?" he asked softly. "You had less technology, less strength. What made you win?" The guard smiled faintly. "We didn't fight to win. We fought because we had to, because no one else would." The scholar nodded slowly. "That's what they say now, that when the gods of the stars fell, it was the humans who taught them how to be afraid." Back on Earth, in the quiet fields where the last battle was fought, Captain Mira Ellen walked alone. The grass was growing again. The wind was soft. The world, though wounded, was alive. She looked up at the night sky, at the broken shapes of ships still orbiting the planet like old scars. Somewhere among them drifted the remains of Admiral Cole and General Zarthul, two warriors from opposite worlds who had both understood the same truth in the end. Mira whispered into the wind, "You made them tremble, Admiral. You made everyone remember." She smiled then, not in pride, but in peace. Humanity had paid a terrible price, but it had earned something no empire could ever buy, the respect of the stars. And far beyond the Milky Way, in the dark between galaxies, where ancient watchers had observed all things, even they whispered the same words. Nothing in the universe made them tremble. Until they met humans, the legend lived on, not of conquerors, not of saviors, but of survivors, the species that stood when all others would have fallen, the ones who fought gods and made them afraid. The end. Made them afraid. The end.